So this is probably one of the most amazing builds that I've done in quite a long time. This is the BRN4, otherwise known as the HK416 clone. Now the BRN4 isn't anything new. It's been out for a few years now. And in fact, I've kind of put off building this for a long time because I just didn't understand why I would even bother with getting something like this. However, after I built it, I now understand, and we're gonna go over everything you need to know about this guy. That way you can decide if this is something you would like to venture into or not. And you might be wondering to yourself, why in the heck would you build a clone instead of just getting the real deal? Well, unless you got 4,700 or 5,000 doll hairs to go spend on a legit civilian model, then this is your best option if you want to get out for less than 1,500 doll hairs. So what is the HK416 exactly? Well, in a nutshell, it's a short stroke piston driven AR-15 that HK designed for the Delta Force. And you might be wondering, well, okay, that's cool, but why? What makes this thing special? Well, Delta Force wanted an AR-15 platform that could handle longer strings of full auto fire. They wanted one that would run cleaner, so they would have less malfunctions, less stoppages, and they wanted something that would be a better suppressor host than a standard direct impingement AR-15. And to top it off, they didn't want it to weigh hardly any more than a standard AR-15. But what exactly makes all this stuff more reliable? And to understand this, we need to kind of go over the differences between a standard direct impingement AR versus a short stroke piston AR. Before we get to that part though, I just want to let you guys know I will have a parts list for everything that we are talking about in today's video. The best way to find that parts list will be the first link in the description. It'll also be pinned in the comments. And for those of you guys that are watching this on your television, I will put a QR code right up here. That way you can pause the video, scan the code with your phone, scroll the parts list while you watch the video. I'll also have a lot of stuff over at the parts list that rhymes with the word chromopode. Flip the first letters around, you'll figure it out. And while I'm thinking about it, if you guys could help me out, hit the subscribe button, I'd greatly appreciate it. So on your standard AR-15, as the bullet travels down the barrel, there's gases that are pushing the bullet out, and those gases come up into a gas port here, go up into this tube, and the gases travel all the way back down, and then they come out at this part of the gas tube right here, which interfaces with the gas key that is on your bolt carrier group, and then the gases go inside here. They push the bolt back, cycles it, wash, rinse, repeat. Whereas on this particular model, being the 416 clone, this is a piston system. So the bullet still travels down the barrel. The gases still go up into this gas block right here, except instead of the gases traveling all the way back down into the chamber area, it actuates this piston, and that moves back and forth like so. And that operates this rod, and this rod will move, and that will interface with, instead of having a gas key, they just have a blank space right here. That rod hits that, and that's what cycles the bolt. Now, there is a difference between what we refer to as a short stroke piston system and a long stroke. Most of your AR-15s are gonna be like this one, which are a short stroke. The biggest difference between the long stroke and short stroke is on a short stroke, this rod is separate from the bolt carrier, whereas on a long stroke, the bolt carrier is part of the rod. So when you insert the bolt, the rod will come all the way through. There's pros and cons about both of those, but we'll get into that in another video because we're not really talking about long strokes in today's video. But as of right now, the only long strokes that I can really think of are gonna be the primary weapon systems, piston ARs, and pretty much all of your AKs are long stroke piston driven. So now that we know the difference between a DI gun and a piston driven gun, what makes this one so special and what is so great about it? Well, typically on a DI AR-15, your most common point of failure is going to be the gas tube. It's designed that way. The gas tube is designed to fail before the barrel fails. The problem with that is for people that are in law enforcement and military, when they need to do longer strings of full auto fire, if that gas tube blows out, your gun is finished. Well, with a piston system, you don't have that gas tube there to fail. In fact, the piston is designed so well that it won't even typically warp unless you put a boatload of rounds and a lot of heat through this gun. And because the piston system doesn't dump carbon back in your chamber, it's going to lead to less fouling of the chamber and less malfunctions. And that's going to be very important, especially when you want to add a suppressor. Now, typically when you add a suppressor to, say, a DI gun, it's going to dump not only a lot more carbon into the chamber area, but it's also going to increase the velocity of the bolt carrier group when it reciprocates. However, the good news is with the 416 clones and some of the 416s, the gas block is vented to push gas away from the shooter instead of back towards the shooter. So because it vents, when you add a suppressor, it theoretically doesn't increase the velocity of the bolt or the bolt carrier group, and that leads to the same amount of wear and tear on a suppressed gun as you would have without a suppressor. And that's kind of cool. But do all of these theoretical improvements actually work? I can't really test the full auto capabilities of this because I don't have access to that, and I didn't have an opportunity to try a suppressor on here. However, I will in the near future because we're going to do more with this, which we'll talk more about later on in the video. However, there is someone on YouTube who's done 2 full auto burn downs. You might have seen them as they go by the name Golden Web. They do a lot of full auto burn down tests. They've tested 2 different BRN4 uppers. And what's interesting about that is one of the uppers they tested is the worst performing upper they've ever had on their channel. And then the other BRN4 upper they have is the top performing upper that they've ever tested on their channel. So on their very first test, they did a 16-inch heavy barrel BRN4 upper, and it only went 560 rounds before it failed. In fact, they don't even 100% understand what failed on it. They theorize that the full auto rate of fire accidentally kicked the piston out and caused it to fail. They don't know yet, and they haven't heard back from Brownells yet on why it failed, at least as a couple of months ago. Then Brownells sent them the 10.4-inch heavy barrel upper, and it outperformed every other single upper that they've ever done a full auto test on before. And it went 1,708 rounds before it stopped working. So let's go over exactly how I built this out. Then we'll go over the shooting footage and if this thing actually worked out well for me or not. Now, as of right now, these are offered in various different forms and flavors. Number 1, you can get this as a complete kit, meaning you have to assemble the upper yourself. The second way that this is offered is as a complete upper minus the handguard, and then they do offer a version that has a handguard with it. I believe it comes with the Midwest Industries handguard, but we'll go into more details about handguards here in a little bit, but I just wanted to bring that up at the moment. Now with the BRN4, they have a few different barrel options. So number 1, you can either get this as a medium profile barrel, which is the one that I have. You can see that it's medium profile by seeing the little bevel that's right here. They also have it in an H-bar version. In addition to coming in various profiles, it also comes in a couple of different barrel types. For example, you can either get this as a nitrided barrel, which is the version that I have, or you can get it as a chrome lined barrel. Now with the nitrided barrels, they come in 3 different lengths. You can get them in a 10.4-inch. You can also get this as a 14.5, which is the version that I have, or a 16-inch. When you move over to the chrome lined version, one of the lengths is a little different. Instead of being able to get a 14.5, they come in a 13.7-inch. That's important because if you want to make this as a pin weld, you're going to have to carefully consider what muzzle device that you're going to put on it to give it a complete length of 16 inches unless you want to SBR it. These are chambered in 5.56 NATO and they're button rifled with a 1-in-7 twist, and the thread pitch for the muzzle device is 1/2 by 28. You'll notice I have a slightly upgraded muzzle device on here. This is the Blackout Defense Hybrid. This is a chemo. The thing is when you pick these up, you don't get a muzzle device. You do get the freedom to be able to put your own muzzle device on. The biggest downside is you're either gonna have to pin weld it yourself or take it in to have it pin welded by a qualified gunsmith if that's the route you're gonna go. But if you get the version that comes with the handguard, I do believe that one comes with an A2 flash hider. Now, under quality control, according to the Brownells website, they do a couple of different QC things that they've mentioned on their website. Number 1, this barrel nut that's right here, they install it 3 times. So what they'll do is they'll crank it down to torque, they'll back it off, crank it down to torque, back it off, crank it back down to torque to ensure accurate torque spec. It is torqued with Aeroshell 64 grease on the threads underneath, and the bolt head and the chamber, they are head spaced before and after the barrel installation. So that way they can verify that the head spacing on here is correct, not just before, but also after the fact. Sometimes when you head space before and you don't head space after, there can be some problems later on. And thankfully, they go through the quality control to actually make sure that that in spec before they ship them out. Now, when we zoom in on the upper receiver itself, some of the complaints I have seen on social media by people, I don't know how well you guys can see this, but if you look in this little groove right here where it's rounded and then meets, you can see some little bitty lines. You can also see some lines right here. You can also see some lines under here. Some people say that's bad quality. Some people say it's not. It doesn't bother me. I mean, when you're just looking at this normally, you honestly can't tell that it's even there. Now, the most affordable way to get the upper is getting it as a build kit. If you get them pre-assembled, sometimes they go on sale. They average anywhere from $9.99 all the way up to, I believe, $1,200 to $1,300 doll hairs, depending on which configuration you get and whether or not there's a sale. But don't worry, I'll have something over at the parts list that rhymes with the word chromopode. That way, you can get it for not as much. Now, this is the old bolt carrier group that I have. They actually have a newer one, but I took it apart because I wanted to show you something. I was taking this guy apart to clean it, and there's a spring on the firing pin, but I noticed either pieces of it looks like some pieces of the spring kind of sheared off on here. I don't know why that is, but I will be ordering a new spring. Thankfully, they do sell the springs separately. I'm gonna be ordering another one, and then I'm also gonna get their newer bolt carrier group that is more high-end than this one right here. This one is your basic mil-spec parts and quality. This one is nitrided. Now, on the newer bolt carrier group, I'll throw some photos up because I don't actually have one. It's a lot different than this one. First off, it's going to be a manganese phosphate coating instead of a nitride. I think one of the reasons they decided to go with the manganese phosphate versus the nitride is nitride's a good coating. The problem with nitriding has nothing to do with the coating. It has to do with the temperatures they have to take the nitriding up to get it cured. So because the temperature window for doing nitriding is very close to the temperature window for heat treating the metal. And so, for example, before the nitride process happens, they heat treat it. And then if they go to nitride it and they don't watch those temperatures very carefully, you could actually undo all of the heat treating that you've done on the bolt. The carrier itself is an 8620 steel. The bolt itself is a 9310 tool steel. On the newer version, these are chromed. They are not nitrided. Also on the newer version, the extractor here is 4340 steel. And then the ejector that's right here on the newer version is an S7 tool steel. If you don't know anything about S7, S7 is stronger than Carpenter 158 steel, so that's always good. Additionally, on the firing pin is an 8740 steel with a chrome finish. Additionally, as I showed you earlier on these, they have a firing pin spring. So the reason that they have that spring there is because the spring returns this back home, kind of like a radial delay that CMMG comes out with, where this is under spring tension to kind of help it push out. I will say, because my spring seems to be screwed up, it's not popping all the way back out. So as I mentioned, I'm ordering a new spring, and I'm going to be ordering the new updated bolt carrier group as well, so we can test that out in the future. But I will say this, it hasn't affected the reliability or the shootability of the gun so far, but that doesn't mean it won't in the future. So let's talk about handguard options as of right now for the HK416 or BRN for clones. Now, I will say this was an area of the build that I really wanted to put a lot of thought into. There's quite a few different handguards you can get. Number one, obviously you could get one from HK and spend a boatload of money. Number two, you can get one from Kinetic Development Group. I'll show some photos of them. They have various colors, they have various links for them. Midwest Industries seems to make a very popular one. And then Brownells actually offers a quad rail. They don't go full length, unfortunately, but they do have multiple colors. The cool thing about the quad rail is it is the most affordable option of the ones that we're going to talk about today. And then the ones that you see in front of you are the Geissele Super Modular Mark 15 416 rails. And these are hands down the hardest rails in the world to get right now. You might get lucky and find them in stock. I will have links to all this stuff over at the parts list, as I mentioned earlier. But here's the deal. I started this build last July, when I ordered all the parts. Everything came in really quickly except for the handguard. So this is the Geissele rail in the DDC, I think it's Desert Dirt something. Then this is the same exact handguard in black, and these are both a 14.5 inch version that fits onto the 14.5 pin welded version. The reason I wanted these was they were uncomplicated, they were 7-sided M-lock, They had reinforced quick detach for your sling swivel. It's not the biggest deal in the world because you can always buy attachments for your M-LOK for that, but this was just my favorite rail. Originally, I ordered this one, and unfortunately, it was back ordered, and there was none in stock anywhere across the entire interwebs. Put into back order and I'll wait for it. A couple of months later, I stumbled across this one in stock, and it was a quote unquote blim, which when I got it, I couldn't find any blims anywhere. I went ahead and I ordered this one. It arrived very quickly. I was able to put it all together. That's why when we get to the shooting footage, all the shooting footage is done with this rail, because this rail that I put in a back order for, it was either July or August of 2024. It just arrived a couple of days ago in March of 2025. I honestly forgot that I even placed the back order for it, but hey, it's here now. These attach really interestingly. It slides on, this one screw is captured, and you just torque that down to spec. A couple of other interesting things about this upper is you probably couldn't see it before because of the optics, but there is a notch right here. And when you assemble the upper receiver on here, you can see how that notch keys into the hole. Now, something to note is not all handguards are gonna have this little notch portion right here. So when you get the BRN uppers, they actually include an adapter piece. So if you get a handguard that doesn't have that notch, there is a piece that slides into the upper, so it will index into that indexing point. So that's kind of cool that regardless if the handguard does it or not, you are able to get that lockup so you get the anti-rotation characteristics. After that, this bolt here, it just simply pushes in. I don't know exactly what kind of tool this thing is supposed to take. I don't know if that's just a really big Phillips head, but I don't have that tool. So I've just been using a pair of pliers and I'm just being very careful with it, and I just crank it down. Once this thing is cranked down, it's not going anywhere, and it looks dead sexy when you take a look at it like that. Now for the optics here, this is the EOTech HHS. It was a kit that came with the EOTech EXPS3 as well as the G45 Magnifier. And then with those, I'm using the Unity Tactical FTC flip to center mount, as well as what I call their diving board. And I've been using these to kind of just switch them around from different platforms as I test them. But these have been rock solid. Love the mounts. They are expensive, but they are worth the money. Also, I am running this 3D printed part called a kill flash. I will say this, unless you're outdoors shooting, that honeycomb kind of is a little bit distracting, at least for me. So they do make one that has a little bit of a center hole punched out. I might try that one later. The biggest downside to this thing, obviously, is it's 3D printed and it clips into place right here. And once you put it in, I don't know how you get it out without breaking it, essentially. If you know, let me know down in the comments, because I haven't figured out how to pull this thing out once it's clipped into place. For my foregrip here, I am using the Emissary Development handbrake. It is in gray, and I know that this thing's gonna be a hodgepodge of different colors, but you also have to remember, I originally had a black handguard. So eventually I will change out that color. But with the black handguard and the gray, it looked a lot better. They are very small. They're very out of the way. And then, so I picked one of these up because I'd never tried them before, but I'm really enjoying these so far. Right here, we are running the HRT AWLS light. This is running an 18650. I do have a code for these if you want to save some money on them. Here's why I like them. With these, you don't have to worry about mounting pressure switches. So you have, I forget what they call this, but I unofficially call this the battle nipple. You can simply hit this from any direction and it will momentarily turn on your light, or you can simply push it like that and you get constant on. If you don't like that, it simply screws right off and you have your basic pressure pad, but there is no momentary without using the battle nipple. They do make these in a couple of different sizes. They include the batteries. I believe they include 1 or 2 batteries as well as the chargers, and they're reversible. So for example, this tube right here, both the head and the tail end come off. So if you want to put it on the other side of the gun, you can flip it around however you see fit. Been running these for a little over a year. Love them to death. As I mentioned, I have 2 of these, one in the smaller version, one in the bigger version, and I also have their AWLS tactical light right here that I just picked up not too long ago. So that's what I'm running on there. I wanted to keep the weight down, and I didn't want to worry about running any wires through here, so that's why I'm running this light. So let's talk about the lower receiver real quick. So I picked this lower receiver up as a complete lower. The only things that I've swapped out on here is I changed the grip to gray from black, and I swapped out the mil-spec trigger for the LaRue 2-stage trigger. This is a fully ambi PWS complete lower. What I love about this is it's a very high-end lower. Comes with a BCM stock. It does come with the BCM grip, as I mentioned. I had this gray one laying around, and I wanted the gray to match the hand stock gray, so I just threw the gray grip on here, but it does come with a black BCM grip and a mil-spec trigger. Additionally, it comes with Radian 4590 ambidextrous safeties. It comes with their fluted buffer tube, as well as their ratcheting castle nut. And then on the end plate right here, we do have a QD socket for a sling. This is a very nice complete lower. One of the main reasons that I got this is on Brownells' website, they say when you get this upper that you should run it with an H2 or an H1 buffer, because this thing is very heavily gassed. And this one included an H2 buffer and spring already included with it. And so it just kind of made sense to put it all together for the build. Now with these uppers, one of the downsides to them is they do come with mil-spec charging handles. And when you're running optics that look like this, those little charging handles that are mil-spec, they're very hard to grab. So I upgraded mine with the Blackout Defense Striker. I love these to death. You can get them in multiple different colors actually, and you can get them with different size latches. I just put the large latch version in there. I think the FDE would probably match better, but these are beyond some of my favorites. The thing that I like about these the most isn't just the fact that they have large latches. They also have these really robust pins that hold the latches in place. If you look at any time a charging handle fails, typically it's going to be due to these pins breaking and shearing off. So having robust pins is definitely a pro. The other thing you'll notice is you can get these as left-handed or right-handed, but this right here is a gas port. So it directs all the gas to the right side of the gun if you're right-handed, or if you're left-handed, you can get these where they'll direct the gas off to the left-hand side. And I also have codes for these. If you want to check them out, there'll be info at the parts list for you. Now, to kind of show you guys a little bit of a comparison on the difference in the height of the receiver as well as the handguard, pulled out my little calipers right here. So we're going to measure the exact distance from the top and the bottom of this receiver right next to the recoil lug of the BRN 4 or HK416 lower. And this one is measuring right at 53 millimeters tall. Then if we come to this one here, this one's measuring right at 47.63 millimeters. And then if we go to the handguard here, especially once you get out past the barrel nut, it's a lot thinner. We'll measure from the top of these Picatinny sections. So on the standard DI, it's 51.8. Then on the Geisley rail for the 416, 65.17. So these are both Geisley rails, and that's why I chose to show this, because it's definitely a lot thicker. And here it is in its final form. Let's stop talking about it. Let's go over the shooting footage and see if I had any problems with this guy or not. So now that I've kind of blew your mind with a bunch of different tech specs and the different parts that I'm using, how did this thing actually run at the range? So as of right now, I have 630 rounds through the gun, and I've tested this with multiple different types of ammo with different grains, different brands. Also tested this with a bunch of different magazines like P-Mags, Lancer Mags, and a couple of others. And so far, we've had 0 malfunctions with this. Now, the first thing you will notice when you pick up an HK416 is gonna be the thicker handguard. This gun feels more substantial in the hand. However, it doesn't feel heavier. So when you're out shooting it, you have a lot more to grab onto right here. And the other thing that surprised me about this is how soft it is to shoot. Now, from what I've researched, the HK416 can typically have a little bit of a harsh recoil impulse, especially for the platform. And we're not talking about recoil that hurts your shoulder. We're talking about recoil where the gun kind of jumps around and it makes it a little bit difficult to shoot fast and flat. This thing shot incredibly smooth and incredibly flat, as you can see in the footage. And I think the reason that that occurs is Brownells did a little bit something special with their bolt carrier groups where they enlarged the backside of the carrier That way they could eliminate carrier tilt, because when carrier tilt occurs, it can make the gun not run as smooth and give it a little bit more of a jerky recoil. Now, I did test a little bit of accuracy with this. I didn't do sub MOA groups with this because honestly, sub MOA groups kind of bore me, and I only typically test that if the gun states it's sub MOA. But I did a laser bore sight on here. I didn't even confirm the 0. I went to the range, put it on a tripod, aimed it at a C-zone steel target at 100 yards. All right, 100 yards, not bad. Let's try to 70. Yeah, I'm not holding. All right, cool. And this thing is just as accurate as I can be. In fact, even after I got the barrel hot, I actually picked it up, I dumped a magazine, then I put a new magazine in it, and I went back to testing accuracy, and it still would hit the C-zone still target at 100 yards without any variations, really. There could have been some variations on where it hit on the target, but for combat accuracy, it was spot on. Now, what about the pricing of these? Now, I did mention in the beginning of the video that if you wanted a legit HK416, that it was gonna cost you almost 5K. Now, what are these gonna cost you? On average, these can range from 1,000 to 1,300 doll hairs, just depending on how you do it. From there, the price of your build is all determined by what handguard you choose, what optics you choose, and what lower build out you choose. So if you really wanted to cheap out, you could just get this upper, get the Brownells BRN quad rail, that's like $200 or $300. Then just get like a PSA complete lower for about 160 bucks, and you can get out pretty cheap with these guys. Now for me, I did kind of go all out on here. Mine all out without any chromo podes on it is about 2479-ish doll hairs. With the chromo podes, comes out to about 2140 to 2250, just kind of depending if things are on sale or not. So I didn't go all out, but I also didn't cheap out on this build either. So now let's go over the pros and the cons of the BRN4. Obviously, the #1 pro of this is it's an affordable, viable option to getting an HK416. You know, there are guys out there that are sticklers for the clones that they build and they want them to be exact. You could do that with this if you wanted to, or at least as close as possible. Or there's guys like me that don't really care if it's a legit clone, they just wanted the operating system and wanting something fun to shoot, you can go that way as well. The next pro is from other people that I've spoken with that have shot both the HK416 as well as this, that these are softer shooting and they have a smoother action and recoil impulse. The next pro is it's just as accurate as I can be, especially for a piston driven gun. The next pro is it has really good quality control. As I mentioned when we were up close, I was talking about all the things that Brownells did to ensure QC on these. The next pro is going to be the weight of this. Earlier in the video when I was talking about the HK416 and why they developed it for Delta Force, I was talking about how they didn't want something that was going to be substantially heavier than your standard AR-15. And so with this one being the 14.5 inch, and this is my Blackout Defense rifle that is a DI gun that is a 13.9 inch, I decided to put these on the scale fully kitted out to see what the difference was in weight. Now I understand this isn't an apples to apples comparison. On this one, I have a really big light and I have the EOTech with the Magnifier. On this one, I have a smaller light, same company, but I have an LPVO. However, fully kitted out on the scale, these things come in very, very close in weight. The BRN4 came out to 10 pounds, 1.5 ounces, while my direct impingement fully kitted out Blackout Defense gun came in at 10 pounds, 1.6 ounces. Now for reference, without any mags and without any of the attachments or optics, the Blackout Defense only comes in at 7 pounds and the BRN4 comes in at 7.7 pounds. So there is a little bit of a variance there, but not bad considering it's a piston-driven AR. Now let's talk about the cons and also some concerns. So my biggest concern with this was, when we looked at this up close, was that spring that is on the bolt. That spring broke off in a couple of different places, and that's only with 630-ish rounds through it. That has me a little bit worried. However, as I mentioned, I do know that Brownells has redesigned their bolt carrier group, so I got to get one of those, and I'm going to be running it through here to see if the same thing happens again. That does have me a little bit disappointed. I feel like that spring should last quite a bit longer than 630 rounds. Another con could be the finish on the receiver. Like I showed you guys up close, it almost looks like there's like 3D printing lines that go across the upper. That doesn't bother me personally because it doesn't affect the functionality, but if you're a stickler or you're a cloner, it might bother you. The second thing that bothers me about this is there's not enough handguard options. I mean, there's like 3 or 4, but at the end of the day, they're really hard to find in stock. As I mentioned with this Geisley rail, it took me almost 8 months for this handguard to arrive when I placed the back order, and that is a little bit annoying. The other con about these uppers in particular is sometimes they go out of stock and then you got to wait for them to come back into stock. I will have info over at the parts list, and I'll have links to everything. That way, if something's out of stock, hopefully you can find a place where it is in stock. Now, the next question is, would I build this again knowing what I know now? And if I did, would I do anything differently? The answer to that question is obviously yes. This thing has surprised me. It was a lot better than I originally anticipated, shoots a lot better than I originally anticipated, and there's nothing I would do different about it. I like everything that I've done to it so far, and it runs phenomenally well. As I mentioned earlier in the video, guys, I am just one person. I have a sample size of 1, and I could have the one upper that worked great, and everyone else's fell apart. I say that because don't take my word for it on these reviews, guys. I made a whole video about this. I'll actually put a link right up here or a QR code for those of you on TV, but I got a whole video that talks about why you should never trust any gun review on YouTube, including my own videos. I go into a lot of detail about this because at the end of the day, no matter who you are, no matter how advanced you think you are, nobody can thoroughly test these the way they all need to be tested all the time. So if there's something I forgot in this video, please let me know down in the comments. But until next time, guys, I love you, and you guys stay sexy.